The bullet skimmed so close to Rebecca Zimmerman's cheek that she felt the heat of it before she heard the crack of the rifle. And in that frozen moment, she knew her past had finally caught up with her in the dusty streets of Boise, Idaho territory. She did not wait to see who had fired. Her feet were already moving, boots kicking up dirt as she ran between the wooden buildings, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. The year was 1878, and Rebecca had been running for 3 months now. Ever since that night in Sacramento when everything had gone so terribly wrong. Her dark hair, which she had kept pinned beneath a worn hat, came loose as she ducked into an alley, strands falling across her face as she pressed her back against the rough wood of a general store. She heard boots on the boardwalk. Heavy, determined. The kind of footsteps that belonged to men who were paid to find people who did not want to be found. "She went this way," a voice called out, rough as gravel. Frank saw her dug behind the mercantile. Rebecca's breath came in short gasps. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the small pistol hidden in the folds of her skirt, a weapon she had never fired at another human being and prayed she would not have to use now. The alley was a dead end, she realized with growing horror. Wooden crates were stacked against the back wall, too high to climb, and the buildings on either side offered no escape. She was trapped. The footsteps grew closer, and she closed her eyes, offering up a silent prayer to a God she was not sure was listening anymore. Not after what she had done. Not after the blood on her hands, even if it had been an accident, even if she had been defending herself. The law did not care about the bruises her stepfather had left on her arms, or the way her mother had looked the other way when he came to Rebecca's room late at night. The law only cared that Theodore Marsh was dead, and Rebecca had been the one holding the fireplace poker. "Check the alley," the voice commanded. Rebecca opened her eyes and raised the pistol with shaking hands. She would not go back. She would not hang for killing a man who had deserved far worse than a quick death. She would not. Hold on there. The new voice was different, deeper, calmer. It carried the kind of authority that made men pause without quite knowing why. "This is none of your concern, friend," the gravel-voiced man said. "We are looking for a fugitive, a murderess." "That's so." The calm voice held a note of skepticism. "And you boys are lawmen, I suppose. We are bounty hunters working within the law, bounty hunters." There was a pause. "In that case, you will not mind showing me your papers. I'm Jackson Abbott, and I run cattle through these parts. The sheriff is a friend of mine, and he likes to know when armed men are chasing women through his town." Rebecca held her breath. She could hear the tension in the silence that followed, could imagine the standoff happening just beyond her line of sight. "We do not have time for this," the bounty hunter said. "Step aside." "I do not think I will." The sound of a hammer being cocked echoed through the alley. Then another. Rebecca's grip tightened on her own weapon. "You are making a mistake," the bounty hunter warned. "Maybe, but I have made plenty of those before." Jackson Abbott's voice never wavered. "Now I am going to count to 3 and you boys are going to walk away. You can come back with the sheriff if you have legitimate business here, but you will not be hunting anyone in this town without proper authority. 1. You do not know who you are dealing with. 2. Rebecca heard the shuffle of feet, angry muttering, and then the reluctant sound of boots retreating. She did not move, barely dared to breathe until she heard footsteps approaching the mouth of the alley. Slow, careful, non-threatening. "You can come out now," Jackson Abbott called. "They are gone." She pressed herself harder against the wall, the pistol still raised. "I am not going to hurt you," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her want to believe him. "But you cannot stay in that alley forever, and those men will be back. If you want help, I am offering it. If you do not, I will walk away and you can take your chances." Rebecca's mind raced. She had trusted no one since fleeing Sacramento, had learned to see betrayal in every friendly face and treachery in every helping hand. But she was tired, so desperately tired, and the thought of running again made her want to weep. "Why would you help me?" she called out, her voice hoarse from dust and fear. "Because I do not like men who hunt women through the streets like animals," he replied. "Because you looked terrified and those boys looked mean. And because I figure everyone deserves to tell their side of the story before being judged. Now, are you coming, or should I leave you be?" She stepped out from the shadows slowly, the pistol still in her hand but pointed at the ground. The man standing at the end of the alley was tall, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of whiskey in firelight. He wore dusty trail clothes and a hat that had seen better days, and there was a revolver at his hip that he had not drawn. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30, with the kind of face that spoke of hard work and honest living. Jackson Abbott took in her appearance without judgment, his gaze moving from her disheveled hair to her worn traveling dress to the small pistol in her hand. "You know how to use that?" he asked. "I have never shot anyone," she admitted. "Good, let's keep it that way." He gestured toward the main street. "My horse is tied up at the saloon. We need to leave town before those bounty hunters decide to make another try, papers or no papers." "Where will we go?" "I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here. You will be safe there while we figure out what comes next." He paused. "That is, if you are innocent of whatever they are accusing you of." Rebecca's throat tightened. "I am not innocent, but I am not a murderess either." It was self-defense. Jackson studied her for a long moment, and she found she could not look away from his steady gaze. Finally, he nodded. "Self-defense is not murder. Come on, then. We are wasting time." She followed him out of the alley, her legs unsteady beneath her. The street had returned to normal, people going about their business as if armed men had not been hunting her mere minutes ago. Jackson's horse was a sturdy chestnut mare with kind eyes, and he swung into the saddle with practiced ease before offering Rebecca his hand. "Have you ever ridden double?" he asked. "Yes, but it has been a while. Just hold on to me. Copper is sure-footed." She took his hand, surprised by the calloused warmth of it, and let him pull her up behind him. The position felt intimate, her arms wrapped around his waist, her body pressed against his back. She could feel the steady rise and fall of his breathing, could smell horse and leather and something else, something like sage and open sky. "What is your name?" he asked as he guided Copper down the street at a measured pace, fast enough to put distance between them and trouble, but not so fast as to draw attention. "Rebecca," she said after a moment's hesitation. "Rebecca Zimmerman." "Well, Rebecca Zimmerman, I hope you are not planning to shoot me in the back once we are out of town." Despite everything, she felt a small smile tug at her lips. "I already told you I have never shot anyone. That is reassuring." His voice held a note of dry humor. "Though there is a first time for everything, I suppose." They rode in silence after that, leaving boys behind as the sun climbed higher in the cloudless Idaho sky. The land here was different from California, wilder and more open, with rolling hills that seemed to stretch on forever. Rebecca had never been to Idaho territory before, had barely left Sacramento before her desperate flight, and despite her fear, she found herself captivated by the stark beauty of the landscape. "Those men will not give up," she said quietly as the town disappeared behind them. "There is a price on my head, $500. Jackson let out a low whistle. "That is a considerable sum. What exactly did you do?" "I killed my stepfather." The words came out flat, devoid of emotion. She had said them so many times in her head that they had lost all meaning. "He came at me drunk and violent, and I defended myself. But he was a respected businessman in Sacramento, and I was just his troublesome stepdaughter. No one believed me when I tried to explain. Your mother, she chose to believe him, even after he was dead. She testified against me at the inquest. Rebecca's voice cracked slightly. I did not wait around for the trial. I knew how it would end. Jackson was quiet for a moment, the only sound the steady rhythm of Copper's hooves on the hard, packed earth. That must have been hard, he finally said. Being betrayed by your own mother. It was. Rebecca blinked back the tears that threatened to fall. She had cried enough over the past 3 months. But I suppose she did what she thought she had to do. She never was a strong woman. Strength comes in different forms, Jackson said. Takes a different kind of courage to run than to stay and face a rope. Some would call it cowardice. Some would be fools. He turned his head slightly and she caught a glimpse of his profile. You are alive, Rebecca. That counts for something. They rode on, the sun beating down on their heads, and Rebecca found herself relaxing incrementally against Jackson's solid back. She had been so alone for so long, always looking over her shoulder, always afraid. The simple act of trusting someone, even tentatively, felt like setting down a heavy burden. Why did you help me? She asked after a while. You do not know me. For all you know, I could be exactly what they say I am. Jackson was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. 5 years ago, my sister ran from an abusive husband. He was a sheriff's deputy down in Colorado, well-liked and respected. When she tried to leave him, he beat her so badly she lost the baby she was carrying. She managed to get away, but he tracked her down and brought her back, claiming she was hysterical and needed his care. The law sided with him because he was the law. Rebecca's heart clenched. What happened to her? She died 6 months later. Fell down the stairs, according to the official report. But I saw her body, saw the bruises that could not have come from any fall. His voice was steady, but she could hear the old grief beneath it. I tried to get justice for her, but there was no proof, and no one wanted to believe a lawman could be a killer. So he walked free, and my sister is buried in a plot outside of Denver. I am so sorry, Rebecca whispered. I swore that day that I would never stand by and watch another woman be hunted by men who claim to represent justice, but only care about protecting their own. He shifted in the saddle. So when I saw those bounty hunters chasing you, I saw my sister running scared with no one to help her. I could not let that happen again. They rode the rest of the way to the ranch in contemplative silence, and when they finally arrived, Rebecca was surprised by what she saw. She had expected something rough and temporary, a simple cabin and perhaps a corral. Instead, Jackson's ranch was a well-maintained spread with a sturdy 2-story house, a large barn, and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and she could see hands working near the far pasture. It is not much, Jackson said as he helped her down from the horse, but it is home. It is beautiful, Rebecca said honestly, her feet touching solid ground. Her legs wobbled slightly from the long ride, and Jackson steadied her with a hand on her elbow. Come on. Let me introduce you to Martha. She runs the house and will not take kindly to me bringing home a guest without warning. Martha turned out to be a stout woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She took one look at Rebecca's exhausted face and dusty clothes and immediately ushered her inside, clucking like a mother hen. You look half-starved, child, Martha declared, already pulling Rebecca toward what appeared to be a spacious kitchen. When was the last time you had a proper meal? I do not remember, Rebecca admitted. Well, that will not do at all. You sit yourself down while I fix you something. Martha shot a look at Jackson, who had followed them inside. And you, Mr. Abbott, You can explain why you are bringing home young ladies who look like they have been sleeping in ditches. It is a long story, Martha. Then you had better start talking while I cook. Over a meal of beef stew and fresh bread, Jackson explained the situation to Martha, leaving out the more personal details of Rebecca's story, but making it clear that she was in trouble and needed help. To Rebecca's surprise, Martha took it all in stride, merely nodding and refilling Rebecca's bowl when she finished. "You will stay in the guest room upstairs," Martha said firmly when Jackson finished. "And those men come around here, they will have to deal with me and my shotgun." "Thank you," Rebecca said, tears pricking her eyes at the unexpected kindness. "I do not know how I can ever repay you." "Nonsense. We help those who need helping. That is just how decent people live." Martha stood and began clearing the dishes. "Now you look ready to fall over. Let me show you to your room so you can get some rest." The guest room was simple but clean, with a real bed covered in a colorful quilt and a window that looked out over the rolling hills. Rebecca stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the normalcy of it all. For 3 months she had slept in barns and abandoned buildings, always with one ear listening for danger, never truly resting. The thought of sleeping in an actual bed, behind locked doors, with people who wanted to protect her rather than capture her, was almost too much to comprehend. "There is water in the pitcher for washing," Martha said gently, "and I will bring up some clean clothes that might fit you. You are about the same size my daughter was. Martha's expression grew sad. "She died of fever 10 years ago. But her clothes have just been sitting in a trunk, and I think she would be happy knowing they were being put to good use." After Martha left, Rebecca stripped off her filthy traveling dress and washed with the cool water from the pitcher, scrubbing away 3 months of dirt and fear and desperation. When she caught sight of herself in the small mirror above the washstand, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She had always been slender, but now she looked gaunt, her cheekbones too prominent, her eyes too large in her thin face. There were shadows under those eyes, dark and deep, the kind that came from too many sleepless nights. Martha returned with an armful of clothes and helped Rebecca into a simple calico dress that fit reasonably well, though it was a bit loose in the bodice. "You need fattening up," Martha declared, "but we will work on that. For now, you rest. There is a lock on the door if it makes you feel safer." "Thank you, Martha, for everything." The older woman patted her hand. "We have all needed help at one time or another, child. No shame in accepting it when it is offered." Rebecca did lock the door after Martha left, old habits dying hard, but for the first time in months, she felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. She lay down on the bed, intending to rest for just a few minutes, but exhaustion claimed her almost immediately, pulling her down into a deep, dreamless sleep. She woke to the sound of voices outside her window, disoriented and afraid until she remembered where she was. The sun was lower in the sky, painting the room in shades of gold and amber. She had slept for hours. Rising, she looked out the window and saw Jackson talking with one of his ranch hands, a younger man with sandy hair and an easy smile. They were standing near the barn, Jackson gesturing toward the distant pasture as he spoke. Even from this distance, Rebecca could see the respect in the younger man's posture, the way he listened attentively to whatever instructions Jackson was giving. As if sensing her gaze, Jackson looked up toward her window. Their eyes met across the distance, and he touched the brim of his hat in a small gesture of acknowledgement. Rebecca found herself smiling, a real smile, the first she had managed in longer than she could remember. That evening, she joined Jackson and Martha for supper, a hearty meal of fried chicken and vegetables from Martha's garden. The conversation was easy, comfortable, nothing like the tense, careful exchanges Rebecca had grown accustomed to during her time on the run. "How long have you had the ranch?" she asked Jackson as they ate. "About 6 years now. I bought it with money I saved working cattle drives up from Texas. It was not much then, just the house and a few acres, but I have built it up over time." There was pride in his voice, the kind that came from honest work and earned success. "I run about 200 head of cattle now, sell them to the mining camps and the railroad when the price is right. It must be hard work." "It is. But it is mine, you know. Every fence post I put in the ground, every calf born in the spring, it all means something. It is building toward something permanent." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "I spent too many years drifting from place to place, never putting down roots. This ranch, it is my way of saying I belong somewhere." Rebecca understood that longing more than he could know. She had never belonged anywhere, not really. Not in the house where her mother had remarried, not in Sacramento society that had looked down on her for being poor before her stepfather's money elevated their status, and certainly not on the run, always moving, always afraid. "What will you do?" Jackson asked gently. "You cannot run forever. I know." Rebecca set down her fork, her appetite fading. "But I do not know what else to do. If I turn myself in, I will hang. If I run, I will spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder." "There might be another option," Jackson said slowly. "The territorial governor is known to be sympathetic to women in difficult situations. If we could get a hearing, present your case with evidence of your stepfather's abuse, you might get a pardon or at least a reduced sentence." "Who would believe me? My own mother did not." "I would," Jackson said simply. "And I know people, Rebecca, people with influence. Let me at least try." She wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that there could be a way out of this nightmare that did not end with her death or a lifetime of running. But hope was a dangerous thing, and she had learned to live without it. "I need time to think," she finally said. "Take all the time you need. You are safe here." Over the following days, Rebecca settled into a routine at the ranch. She helped Martha with the household chores, learning to cook and clean and mend in ways her mother had never bothered to teach her. She found she enjoyed the simple, honest work, the way it made her feel useful and grounded. Martha was patient with her mistakes and generous with her praise. And for the first time, Rebecca felt what it might be like to have a real mother, one who cared. Jackson was often out working with his cattle, but in the evenings he would seek her out, and they would talk as the sun set over the hills. He told her about his childhood in Missouri, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 16 and raising his younger sister alone until she married. He spoke of the cattle drives he had worked, the places he had seen, the dreams he had chased across the Western territories. In turn, Rebecca found herself opening up about her own past, the parts she had kept locked away for fear of judgment. She told him about her real father, who had died when she was 10, and how her mother had remarried within a year to Theodore Marsh. She spoke of the fear that had colored her teenage years, the way Theodore had looked at her that made her skin crawl, the night he had finally acted on those looks, and she had fought back with the only weapon at hand. "I dream about it sometimes," she admitted one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "The sound the poker made when it connected with his skull, the way he fell, the blood. That is natural," Jackson said quietly. "Taking a life, even in defense of your own, it changes you." "Have you ever killed anyone?" He was quiet for a moment. "During the war, yes. I was young, barely 17, and I thought it was all about honor and glory. But there is no glory in killing, Rebecca, just necessity and regret." She turned to look at him in the growing darkness. "Do you regret it?" "I regret that it was necessary, but I do not regret surviving." He met her gaze. Same way you should not regret fighting back against a man who would have hurt you. Your life has value, Rebecca. Do not ever forget that. His words touched something deep inside her, a part of herself she thought Theodore Marsh had destroyed. She found herself blinking back tears, overwhelmed by the simple kindness of this man who owed her nothing but had given her everything. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me as more than what I have done. For treating me like I am worth saving." Jackson reached out and gently wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. His touch was warm and careful, and Rebecca found herself leaning into it without thinking. "You are worth saving, Rebecca Zimmerman. I knew that the moment I saw you in that alley, terrified but still standing, still fighting. That takes strength." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Rebecca could not quite name. Then Jackson pulled back, clearing his throat slightly. "It is getting late. You should get some rest." As the weeks passed, Rebecca found herself thinking about Jackson more and more. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness in his hands when he worked with the horses, the patience he showed with his men. She noticed the way her heart would lift when she heard his boots on the porch, the way she found excuses to be where he was. It terrified her, this growing affection. She had no right to feel this way, not with a price on her head, not with her future so uncertain, and yet she could not help it. Jackson Abbott had given her something she had never expected to find again: hope. One afternoon, as she was helping Martha preserve vegetables from the garden, the older woman gave her a knowing look. "You are falling for him, are not you?" Rebecca nearly dropped the jar she was holding. "What? No, I do not bother denying it, child. I have eyes. And I have seen the way he looks at you, too." "How does he look at me?" Martha smiled. "Like you are the answer to a question he has been asking himself for a long time." "I cannot let myself think that way," Rebecca said, her voice pained. "I have nothing to offer him but trouble. Those bounty hunters could come back any day. I could bring danger right to his door. Jackson is a grown man who makes his own choices. If he wants to help you, if he cares for you, that is his decision to make." Martha placed a gentle hand on Rebecca's arm. "Do not push away happiness because you think you do not deserve it. Everyone deserves a chance at love, even people who have made mistakes. This was not a mistake. I killed a man. You defended yourself against a predator. That is not the same thing, and you know it." Martha's voice was firm. "Stop punishing yourself for surviving, Rebecca." That night, Rebecca lay awake in her room, Martha's words echoing in her mind. She thought about Jackson, about the life he had built here, about the possibility of something more than just survival. Could she dare to hope for a future that included love, stability, belonging? A sound outside her window made her freeze. Footsteps, soft and cautious, circling the house. Her heart began to race as she slipped out of bed and moved to the window, careful to stay in the shadows. 3 men on horseback were approaching the house slowly, and in the moonlight she recognized one of them, the bounty hunter from Boys. They had found her. Rebecca's first instinct was to run, to grab her few belongings and slip out the back before they could surround the house. But as she turned toward the door, she thought of Jackson sleeping downstairs, of Martha in her room down the hall, and she knew she could not leave them to face the consequences of harboring her. Instead, she unlocked her door as quietly as she could and made her way downstairs. She found Jackson already awake, standing by the front window with his rifle in hand, his expression grim. "You heard them," she whispered. He nodded. "Martha is awake too, watching the back. They have us surrounded." "I will go with them," Rebecca said quickly. "I will not let them hurt you because of me." "Like hell you will," Jackson's voice was hard. "Nobody is taking you anywhere. Jackson, please. There are 3 of them, maybe more. You could be killed. Then I will be killed defending someone worth defending." He looked at her, his eyes intense in the dim light. "I am not letting them have you, Rebecca. Not now, not ever." Before she could respond, a voice called out from the darkness. "Abbott, we know the girl is in there. Send her out and we will leave peacefully. Resist and this gets ugly." Jackson moved to the door but did not open it. "You are on my property illegally. Leave now, or I will defend my home. We have legal right to pursue a fugitive from justice. Show me your papers in the light of day and we will talk. Until then, you are trespassing, and in Idaho territory, a man has the right to shoot trespassers." There was a long silence. Then the voice said, "You are making a big mistake, Abbott. That girl is wanted for murder. That girl has a name, and she has rights, including the right not to be hunted in the middle of the night by men who may or may not be operating legally." Jackson's voice carried through the closed door. "Come back in the morning with the sheriff and proper documentation, or do not come back at all." Rebecca heard angry muttering from outside, then the sound of horses moving. She held her breath, waiting for gunfire, for violence, but instead, the sounds gradually faded into the distance. "They will be back," she said quietly. "I know." Jackson set the rifle aside and turned to face her fully. In the dim light from the banked fire, his features were shadowed but earnest. "Rebecca, I need you to listen to me. I have been thinking about what I said before, about seeking a pardon from the territorial governor. I want to pursue that. But more than that, I want you to stay here, not as a fugitive hiding from the law, but as someone who belongs." "What are you saying?" He crossed the distance between them, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I am saying that somewhere between pulling you out of that alley and now, I started to care about you. More than care. I am falling in love with you, Rebecca, and I think you might feel the same way." Her breath caught in her throat. "Jackson, you do not have to say anything right now, but I want you to know that I am not helping you out of pity or obligation. I am helping you because I cannot imagine my life without you in it anymore." He reached out and gently took her hand. "Stay. Let me help you clear your name. And when this is all over, if you feel the same way I do, then maybe we can build something together. A real future." Rebecca looked up at him, this man who had risked everything for her, who saw her not as a murderess or a victim, but as a woman worthy of love and respect. Her heart felt like it might burst from the emotions swelling inside her. "I do feel the same way," she whispered. "I have been trying not to, trying to protect myself from more hurt, but I cannot help it. I love you, Jackson Abbott." He smiled then, a brilliant, joyful expression that transformed his entire face, and pulled her into his arms. Rebecca went willingly, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. For the first time since that terrible night in Sacramento, she felt truly safe. "We will figure this out," Jackson murmured into her hair. "I promise you we will find a way." The next morning, Jackson rode into Boise to speak with the sheriff, a man named Tom Crawford who Jackson had known for years. Rebecca waited anxiously at the ranch, helping Martha with the laundry but unable to focus on anything except the sound of approaching hoofbeats. When Jackson finally returned in the early afternoon, he was not alone. Sheriff Crawford rode beside him, a weathered man in his 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor and sharp gray eyes. Rebecca's first instinct was to run, but she forced herself to stand still as the two men dismounted and approached the house. Jackson caught her eye and gave her a small, reassuring nod. "Miss Zimmerman," Sheriff Crawford said, removing his hat, "I am not here to arrest you. Jackson has asked me to hear your story and I have agreed, but I need you to be completely honest with me. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir," Rebecca said, her voice steadier than she felt. They sat in the parlor and Rebecca told her story from beginning to end. She held nothing back, describing her stepfather's abuse, the night he attacked her, her mother's betrayal. She explained why she had run rather than face trial, her certainty that she would not receive a fair hearing. Sheriff Crawford listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, "That is a hard story, Miss Zimmerman, and I believe you, but belief is not the same as proof, and without proof, I cannot just make this go away." "I understand." "However," the sheriff continued, "Jackson has told me he wants to petition the territorial governor for clemency on your behalf. I am willing to support that petition with my own statement attesting to your character during the time you have been here. It is not much, but it might help." Hope flared in Rebecca's chest. "You would do that?" "I would. But you need to understand that this process could take months and there are no guarantees. In the meantime, those bounty hunters are not going to give up. The reward on your head is too high." "What can we do?" Jackson asked. Sheriff Crawford rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "Legally, not much. I can tell them they need to operate through official channels, but if they are determined, they will find a way. Your best bet is to keep her out of sight and hope the petition goes through quickly." After the sheriff left, Jackson and Rebecca sat together on the porch, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. "This is not what you signed up for," Rebecca said quietly. "When you pulled me out of that alley, you could not have known it would come to this." "No, I could not have," Jackson agreed. "But I do not regret it, do you?" She turned to look at him, this strong, kind man who had become her whole world. "No, I only regret bringing danger to your door. Danger and I are old friends." He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "We will get through this, Rebecca. Together." The weeks that followed were tense. The bounty hunters made several more attempts to reach Rebecca, but each time Jackson and his ranch hands drove them off. Sheriff Crawford visited regularly, bringing updates on the petition to the governor and making his presence known as a deterrent to any illegal action. During this time, Rebecca and Jackson grew closer. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, sharing dreams and fears and hopes for the future. Jackson taught her to ride properly, patient as she learned to handle his gentlest mare. She learned the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and hard work, the satisfaction of caring for animals and land. Martha watched it all with a knowing smile, commenting one day that she had not seen Jackson this happy since before his sister died. "You have given him something to fight for besides just himself," she told Rebecca. "That is a precious gift." One evening, about 2 months after Rebecca's arrival at the ranch, Jackson took her riding out to a high point that overlooked the valley. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the world seemed to hold its breath in the fading light. "I used to come here when I first bought the ranch," Jackson said as they sat on a flat rock, their horses grazing nearby. "When things got hard and I wondered if I had made a mistake, if I should just sell out and move on. But then I would look at this view and I would remember why I stayed." "It is beautiful," Rebecca said softly. "It is, but it is not what I see anymore when I come here." He turned to face her fully. "Now when I come here, I see you. I see us building a life together. I see children running through the fields, maybe a bigger house to hold a growing family. I see a future I never thought I would have." Rebecca's heart was pounding. "Jackson, I know the timing is not ideal. I know we are still waiting to hear from the governor and there are no guarantees about what will happen. But I also know that I love you, Rebecca Zimmerman, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "This was my mother's ring. I have been carrying it with me for 15 years, waiting for the right woman to give it to. You are that woman. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Rebecca's face as she looked at the ring, at Jackson's hopeful expression, at the life he was offering her. A life she had never thought she deserved, a future she had stopped believing in. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Jackson slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, gentle and sweet and full of promise. Rebecca kissed him back, pouring all her love and hope and gratitude into that moment. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the ranch. Sheriff Crawford attended, as did several of Jackson's ranch hands and neighbors who had come to know and respect Rebecca during her time there. Martha cried happy tears and fussed over Rebecca's dress, one of her daughters that had been altered to fit properly. It was not a fancy wedding, but it was perfect. As Rebecca stood beside Jackson and spoke her vows, she felt the weight of her past begin to lift. She was no longer just a fugitive running from her mistakes. She was Jackson Abbott's wife, a rancher's partner, a woman with a home and a future. 3 months after the wedding, a letter arrived from the territorial governor's office. Rebecca's hands shook as she opened it, Jackson standing beside her, his arm around her shoulders. The governor had reviewed her petition, and the supporting statements from Sheriff Crawford and several prominent citizens who had come to know her. In light of the evidence of Theodore Marsh's history of abuse, which had been corroborated by several servants who had finally come forward, and Rebecca's exemplary conduct during her time in Idaho Territory, the governor was granting her a full pardon. She was free. Rebecca read the letter 3 times before the words truly sank in. Then she turned to Jackson, tears streaming down her face, and he caught her up in his arms, spinning her around as Martha whooped with joy from the doorway. "It is over," Rebecca said, laughing and crying at the same time. "It is really over." "No," Jackson said, setting her down and cupping her face in his hands. "It is just beginning." The bounty hunters came one last time, a week after the pardon arrived. But this time, Rebecca stood on her porch beside her husband, Sheriff Crawford on her other side, and presented them with the official documentation clearing her name. The men left empty-handed and furious, but there was nothing they could do. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. Rebecca threw herself into ranch life, learning everything she could about managing cattle and horses. She discovered she had a gift for bookkeeping and took over managing the ranch's accounts, freeing Jackson to focus on the physical work he loved. She also began to heal from the trauma of her past. The nightmares grew less frequent, and she found she could think about her mother without the sharp pain of betrayal. She wrote her mother one letter, brief and factual, informing her of the pardon and her new life. She did not expect a response and did not receive one, but the act of reaching out helped her find closure. A year after their wedding, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. Jackson was overjoyed, though his joy was tempered with concern for her health and safety. Martha took charge, ensuring Rebecca got enough rest and proper food, and Sheriff Crawford's wife, Elena, became a regular visitor, sharing advice from her own experiences as a mother. Their son was born on a cool October morning in 1879, strong and healthy, with his father's eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him James Thomas Abbott, and Jackson cried when he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed with love and gratitude. Watching her husband cradle their newborn, Rebecca felt a peace she had never known. This was what healing looked like. This was what love could build from the ashes of tragedy. Over the next several years, they expanded the ranch, buying adjacent land and increasing their herd. Rebecca proved to be a shrewd businesswoman, negotiating better prices for their cattle and establishing relationships with buyers across the territory. Jackson's respect for her grew with every passing year, and he made sure everyone knew that the ranch's success was as much her doing as his. They had 2 more children, a daughter they named Sarah after Jackson's mother, and another son they called Thomas after Rebecca's father. The house rang with laughter and the sounds of children playing, and sometimes Rebecca would stop in the middle of her day and just marvel at how much her life had changed. Martha lived with them until she passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 68, surrounded by the family she had helped create. Rebecca mourned her deeply, grateful for the kindness the older woman had shown when she had needed it most. Sheriff Crawford remained a close friend, and when he retired, he recommended that Jackson be appointed as a deputy sheriff for the region. Jackson accepted, wanting to help others the way he had helped Rebecca. He became known for his fairness and his particular concern for women and children in difficult situations. One spring evening, when Rebecca was 35 and their children were playing in the yard, she and Jackson sat on the porch watching the sunset, just as they had done countless times before. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but to Rebecca, he was as handsome as the day she had first seen him. "You ever regret it?" she asked, leaning against his shoulder. Taking a chance on a fugitive hiding in an alley, Jackson wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "Not for a single moment. You gave me a family, Rebecca. You gave my life purpose beyond just building up land and cattle. You gave me love." "You gave me all those things too," she said softly. "You gave me a future when I thought I had none. You saw worth in me when I could not see it in myself." "We saved each other," Jackson said. "That is what love does." As the sun dipped below the horizon and their children's laughter drifted on the evening breeze, Rebecca thought about the terrified young woman she had been, running for her life with no hope and no plan. She thought about the moment Jackson Abbott had stepped between her and her pursuers, how that one act of courage and compassion had changed everything. She had been hiding from her past, convinced she did not deserve a future. But Jackson had seen through her fear and guilt to the woman underneath, and he had offered her not just safety but love, not just survival but a life worth living. Years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and milestones. James grew into a thoughtful young man who loved working with the horses. Sarah developed her mother's head for numbers and her father's sense of justice. Little Thomas, adventurous and bold, kept them all on their toes with his explorations and schemes. When Idaho achieved statehood in 1890, Jackson and Rebecca attended the celebration in Boise, standing in the very streets where their story had begun. Rebecca held her husband's hand and thought about how far they had come, how much they had built together. "You remember that alley?" she asked him. "Every day," Jackson said. "Best wrong turn I ever took," she laughed. "It was not a wrong turn. It was exactly where you needed to be." "Where we needed to be," he corrected, kissing her temple. As they aged, the ranch continued to thrive under their combined stewardship. They hired good men who treated the land and animals with respect, and several of their workers stayed on for decades, becoming like family. The Abbott Ranch became known throughout southern Idaho for its quality cattle and fair dealing. Rebecca never forgot where she had come from or the darkness she had escaped. She made a point of helping other women in difficult situations, providing refuge and support to those fleeing abuse or persecution. She worked with Jackson in his capacity as deputy to ensure that women's voices were heard and their safety prioritized. Their children grew and married, giving them grandchildren who filled the ranch with new energy and life. James took over the day-to-day running of the ranch, proving to have inherited his parents' work ethic and integrity. Sarah married a lawyer and moved to Boise, where she became an advocate for women's rights. Thomas became a veterinarian, using his love of animals to serve the community. In their later years, Jackson and Rebecca spent quiet evenings on the porch, watching the grandchildren play where their own children once had. They told stories of the old days, though they kept the darkest parts of Rebecca's past from the youngest ears, wanting to protect their innocence a while longer. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered for a celebration. There was food and music and dancing, and Rebecca looked around at the sea of faces, all connected to her and Jackson, all part of the life they had created together. Quite a legacy, Sheriff Crawford, now long retired and white-haired, said as he stood beside her. Who would have thought that scared girl in the alley would build all this? I could not have done it without Jackson, Rebecca said. Maybe not, but he could not have done it without you either. You two brought out the best in each other. That is what real love does. When Jackson died at the age of 72, surrounded by his family, Rebecca held his hand and whispered all the things she loved about him, all the ways he had changed her life. His last words were, "No regrets, my love, only gratitude." Rebecca lived another 8 years, long enough to see her great-grandchildren born, long enough to ensure that the ranch would continue to thrive for another generation. She spent her final years writing down the story of how she and Jackson had met, wanting their descendants to know the truth of their beginning, the darkness they had overcome, and the light they had found in each other. She passed peacefully in her sleep on a warm summer night, and her children found her in the morning with a smile on her face, the journal containing her story open on the bedside table to the final entry. I was a girl hiding from her past, running from a future I thought would only bring pain and death. But Jackson Abbott saw me, truly saw me, and he gave me something I thought I had lost forever, the chance to be loved, to build a life, to believe I deserved good things. He gave me a future I never thought possible, and I gave him my heart. We built something beautiful together, something that will outlast us both. To anyone reading this who feels lost or afraid or unworthy of love, know that your past does not define your future. There is always hope. There is always a chance for redemption. There is always love waiting for those brave enough to accept it. Rebecca was buried beside Jackson on a hill overlooking the valley, the same spot where he had proposed all those years ago. Their gravestone bore a simple inscription: Jackson and Rebecca Abbott, they saved each other. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, and with it, the story of the cowboy who found a girl hiding from her past and gave her a future she never thought she deserved. It became family legend, told and retold, a reminder that everyone deserves a second chance, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust someone enough to let them help you. The legacy of Jackson and Rebecca Abbott lived on not just in the land they had worked or the cattle they had raised, but in the lives they had touched, the example they had set, and the love they had shared. They had proven that even from the darkest circumstances, beauty could grow, that past mistakes did not have to dictate future happiness, and that true love was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Their story became a testament to the power of compassion, the importance of seeing beyond surface judgments, and the transformative nature of unconditional love. Jackson had looked at a frightened fugitive and seen a woman worth saving. Rebecca had looked at a stranger's kindness and found the courage to hope again. Together, they had built a life that neither could have imagined alone, a love that endured every challenge, and a family that carried their values forward into a new century. In the end, it was not the circumstances of their meeting that defined them, but the choices they made afterward. Jackson chose to help when it would have been easier to walk away. Rebecca chose to trust when every instinct told her to run. And together, they chose love over fear, hope over despair, and forgiveness over condemnation. Those choices, made day after day, year after year, created something remarkable. A true partnership built on mutual respect, unwavering support, and deep, abiding love. The ranch still stands today, over 100 years later, now run by the fifth generation of Abbotts. The family still gathers each year on the anniversary of Jackson and Rebecca's wedding, still tells the story of how it all began, still honors the courage and love of their remarkable ancestors. And on quiet evenings, if you stand on that hill where Jackson proposed and where they are now buried, you can almost feel their presence in the wind, still watching over the land they loved, still together in death as they were in life. Their love story complete and perfect, with no loose ends, no unanswered questions, only the peaceful certainty of a life well lived and a love that truly conquered all.